Greetings everyone. I am speaking to you on the shores of the South Saskatchewan River on the traditional territory of the Cree people and the homeland of the Métis people. And it's my pleasure and honor to speak to you about the Indigenous Pastoral Lay Ministry Program. This program was developed as a result of the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and also the United Nations document on the rights of Indigenous people, also called UNDRIP. And in the calls to action, there is a strong emphasis on educating towards the UNDRIP document and also directing to churches to educate and form their non-Indigenous congregations, and especially their non-Indigenous ministry people, which would include priests and clergy, religious and lay leaders. There are many issues that make up a proper course and curriculum that would address a range of issues that came up at the TRC. They would include the following: the various Indigenous peoples of our countries, especially of our regions, of our dioceses, the history of contact, the positive and the challenging features of that contact, the elements that missionaries and others who met Indigenous peoples encountered in terms of their culture, spirituality, way of life, ways of knowing, and other features of their cultures. Of course, there is a lot of crossover between Indigenous and Christian spiritualities. In particular, what does Catholic moral and social teaching help illumine in terms of the history of contact, some of the challenges and issues that should be emphasized in Truth and Reconciliation, and ways in which both Indigenous spirituality and ways of knowing on the one hand and Catholic moral and social teaching can create a dialogue as we move forward together. One of the issues that came up right away from some of my brother bishops, for example, was this is an important task. However, most theologians don't have the competence to do all that it takes to do this well. Well, of course, this means having Indigenous elders, knowledge keepers, and other teachers help create the content and the dialogue. Many interested people in the Diocese of Saskatoon came together, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to put together this project. This project represents a partnership of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Saskatoon, Greater Saskatoon Catholic Schools, and St. Thomas More College at the University of Saskatchewan. We are very blessed here in Saskatoon to have many Indigenous, Cree and Métis teachers who work in our rather large Catholic school system here. And so we put together a curriculum committee and got to work. And over a period of about a year and a half, put together a curriculum that would include the following general topics: the Cree people and First Nations history, Métis people and their history in Western Canada with reference to Saskatchewan, the history of contact with Catholic missionaries, the features of that contact, the positive and the challenging, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and its features, especially in terms of its calls to action, and the principles from the United Nations document of the rights of Indigenous peoples, the features and the challenges that need most attention, highlights of Catholic moral and social teaching that come to bear on these tasks. You know, there's many opportunities with this kind of program, and one is showing how the history of contact ended up creating relationship. I remember in the Northwest Territory, a Clecho Dene elder said to me the following: there was a reason why our people responded so well to the missionaries. The teaching that they brought and our traditional teaching was so close and parallel, they were in many ways deemed to be the same. Of course, many Indigenous peoples and others are saying the truth and reconciliation challenges are very important, and without truth there is no reconciliation. So it is our hope that with these dialogues and this opportunity to become aware of culture, history, contact, and other features, that will create a dialogue and awareness that will really help move forward the whole Truth and Reconciliation project.
Hello, my name is Adrienne Castellan, and with Bishop Mark Hageman of the Diocese of Saskatoon, I help him with the Indigenous Pastoral Lay Leader Ministry Education Program. I am being videoed today from Fort Langley, British Columbia, where I live, and it is the traditional, unceded and ancestral territory of the Kwantlen, Katzie, Matsqui, Semiahmoo, and Métis Federation. Fort Langley is a very colonial place. It was the place where the Hudson's Bay Company had a fur trading post, and it is therefore a representation of the Indigenous settler relationship that we are seeking to explore in the IPL program. What we're aiming to do in this program is to provide a place for pastoral leaders, parish leaders, Catholic school teachers, other teachers, people in ministry, in any context, provide them a place to learn about the Indigenous church reconciliation efforts, to learn about the history of First Nations people, the Indigenous settler relationship over the years, contemporary issues, and how the church is moving forward with reconciliation. I want to read you a quote that I find really compelling, that really captures this well, and it is from the Indigenous Catholic website. And some of the scholars from Indigenous Catholic present in our program, and we're very happy to have them. But I'll read to you now this quote. It says, "Indigenous Catholicism and Indigenous Catholic relations are not reducible to their entanglement in colonialism. However, the Church's entanglement in colonialism, perceived and real, weighs heavily on many Indigenous and non-Indigenous Catholics, as well as those who hesitate at the doors of the church." So this for me is essential to the purpose that drives the IPL program. And we are people of reconciliation, seeking hope and a new way forward, working with Indigenous Catholics and non-Indigenous Catholics, because as a church we need to heal, and Indigenous Catholics indeed need to heal, and we want to do that together. The Indigenous Pastoral Lay Ministry Program is an example of that effort. It started in the Diocese of Saskatoon thanks to the vision of Bishop Mark Hageman, and it involves and invites people from mostly the Western provinces, and it's an online program including priests, including sisters, including Catholic school teachers. We've had some lawyers, social services and healthcare providers. These are people who are interested in church and Indigenous reconciliation, and this program is a so-called safe place for them to be Catholic and to be allies to Indigenous church reconciliation. Basically, we're trying to help them think differently, pastorally, theologically differently about reconciliation and living as Catholics in what we now call Canada together.
It was really striking to see that in spite of what we might see in the media, there really are people working together to heal relationships, to strengthen communities, and to rejoice in the diversity of culture that Creator God gives to us.
Engaging with reconciliation from a theological lens, which I hadn't really taken the time to turn my mind to before. So looking at the parallels between reconciliation and how we talk about it in the public sphere around Indigenous church, Indigenous crown relations, but also what parallels are there in that discussion with how we understand reconciliation within the church.
Yeah, I was surprised how really there's still a lot of ignorance and prejudice about this part of the Canadian history, which is rooted in the past, but in reality, I would say it's even in the recent past and nowadays.
I had a lot of the students coming and saying, I never understood this before, or I never really understood this connection with the Indigenous and the church. And so I think that was one of the biggest pieces, that it was an educational learning opportunity as adults, but not just only for the students, but for us as the instructors as well.
How we are all spiritually attached to all things in creation. So much mirrored what we hear in the Bible and the creation story there.
The opportunity for both myself as an Indigenous person and the predominantly non-Indigenous participants to come together in a space and demystify one another in a place of safety and comfort and a genuine interest.
The Indian Act and residential schools ultimately were things that were put in place that segregated this country. And it's a segregation that I would suggest hasn't gone away yet. And we see this by just the stats of the distinction between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. We see this in lower rates of graduation. We also see this in the reality that we still view the history of residential schools as not necessarily Canadian history, but sometimes the history of Indigenous people. And as a result, we see it still is something that separates us.
I went into that program with a strong aspect of what Indigenous culture and Indigenous spirituality was like, but I really wanted to find that connection to my Catholic faith. I wanted to build that bridge because since our very first 215 unmarked graves were found, I've been having such a struggle connecting my culture and my faith together. I feel like I'm just kind of walking on a teeter-totter and I just don't know how to keep it balanced and being pulled in both directions. I went into the IPL course hoping that I could build those connections, that I could somehow feel confident and stronger knowing that my Catholic faith didn't try to destroy my ancestors. And I found that through the conversations.
I thought it was a very interesting group of students, but very engaged students who really wanted to be there to learn, to make a difference. And so certainly as an instructor, I felt like I didn't have to convince any of the students that the topics we were looking at were important.
The facilitators of the program built the learning experience based on relationship that was very integral to the Indigenous people. I found the group discussions to be excellent because we got to know each other in the small groups, which was very, very important. We got to know our level of experiences with Indigenous people, and then we also were able to digest the material at our own level within the context of relationships.
And what I experienced in this journey with the participants is that, as all of us said, there was so much that we didn't know about legislation and the constitutional contexts, the Indian Act, and to work with them on that journey of giving them that time and space and sense of community to explore the wrongdoings and the hidden agendas or the beliefs at that time as to what was progress was extremely humbling for all of us to say, wow, as Canadians and as Catholics, there's so much we don't know.
It was designed in a way that really welcomed us to enter into a journey. And it was recognizing that everyone in our class came from different walks of life and had different histories.
And church teaching is so rich, so incredibly rich. And what that really taught me is that it has so many tools and teachings that can really help us to advance this relationship forward, despite what some people may perceive about the church.
The interconnectedness of all things. That is, when I'm sitting learning from the Indigenous way of knowing and Indigenous cultural knowledge, this profound respect for every person, every creation, the land and the universe itself, all united in an interconnectedness that Creator participates in and watches over.
Understanding more and more the wound of colonization, the way that it's hurt everyone in Canada, in particular, of course, Indigenous people, and more awareness of that and how that can color our ministry.
And I learned the importance to connect to each other, to be present, and really to appreciate our Creator as the giver of life,
So understanding where we came from, our ancestors, and that not only applies to Indigenous people and how important it is that they learn about their culture, but it also reminded me how important that is for myself to know where I came from. And
I think one of the biggest ones from many elders is respect. Even when you completely and utterly and totally disagree with somebody, you always have respect.
Because I'm Indigenous, a lot of Indigenous teachings inform my everyday life. And I think that for those of us who have taken the IPL course know this, and those that are learning, that there are so many connections, and really it comes down to loving each other, not with no judgment.
And so coming into the course, I thought how I could contribute was the fact that I was nurtured and brought up to go to my Cree ceremonies and to have the same reverence and respect when I entered a church, that the two were not the same, but were deserving of the same amount of respect.
We've discovered a very big word in the Cree language. It's a power-packed word, and it's become the foundation of our efforts to rebuild our community. And it's the word Wakohtuin. Wakohtuin is a powerful word that expresses connection between people. And it's not a static word, it's a word of action, it's a word that comes alive. When we take that notion of building relationships, relatedness, goes back to 1876. The people, Mr. Oasis, Atakako, Pistakwakeo, Kitawehao, these chiefs, they went and they signed Treaty 6, believing and being led by the teachings of Wakohtuin. In other words, the most important thing you can do as a human being is get connected with another human being in a good way. And the context of that connection has to be the Creator, God. And so, 1876, pipe ceremony was very important. That ceremony of prayer was central to the understanding that the Cree people, as damaged as they were at that point by the poor economics, understood the importance of connecting in a positive way with the new people that were coming to live beside them on this beautiful land.
I would like to highlight what Saint Pope John XXIII says about prejudice. In reality, it's primarily a result of a lack of contact between races.
Respect for the human person, the dignity of each individual person. And I think that's something that I constantly remind myself in doing anything.
The goods of the earth are for all, that the right distribution and the well-being of all is really important, is crucial. And in terms of the communal nature of historically what used to be, the communal nature of Indigenous communities, the idea of everyone is taken care of in the community. So there's an alignment there, a very big alignment.
We care for our brothers and sisters, and we acknowledge that we can't do this alone.
It's recognizing that we're still called as Catholics to see the image and likeness of God in everyone, and to treat them as if every person can be in interaction with our Creator.
The church has these initiatives. I know it's not necessarily across the board, but I appreciate that there's different dioceses, particularly the Diocese of Saskatoon, that's really making an effort to provide these learning opportunities for people who work with Indigenous communities so they can really understand the context and the background and the history and come to their ministry more ready and more and can subsequently, I think, be more effective.
And again, the fact that we have a chance to be taught by Indigenous leaders and to take in their wisdom, and the fact that they're giving us that time, I'm grateful for the chance to hear that and receive that.
I have the strong sense that the learning that we're doing in the IPL program would benefit any Catholic. The learning that they would achieve in this program would grow their understanding and their capacity to facilitate compassionate conversations.
We need to continue to encourage, more people to be participants in this program.
I feel that there's hope. There's hope within reconciliation. The people who are coming to be a part of this program, both the instructors and the students, are here to enhance their ministry, to enhance their understanding, to enhance their ability to go out and build relationships and go out and actualize reconciliation.
I've not been able to answer all the questions regarding the Indigenous experience, but at least I can ask the right questions. And that for me is excellent.